The following program is brought to you free of charge by the sponsorship of Novus Ordo Watch. See for yourself that the Church of the Second Vatican Council is not in fact the Catholic Church of the ages. Go to novusordowatch.org.
Thank you for joining Restoration Radio. I am your host, Stephen Heiner. I have as my guest tonight His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn and Father Anthony Cekada. And we're going to take a first look at the newest claimant to the post-Vatican II papacy, Francis. And it's not Francis the First. You have to have a second in order to be called the first. So he's just Pope Francis to the secular media and the rest of the post-Vatican II Church. Our show today is sponsored by Novus Ordo Watch. Habemus Papam, they have a pope. As the Vatican II Church elects its sixth anti-pope, go to novusordowatch.org for traditional Catholic information on the recent events in Rome. Since 2002, Novus Ordo Watch has been exposing the Vatican II Church and its false popes by comparing and contrasting the new religion with the true religion, the modernist Novus Ordo teachings with the teachings of the Catholic Church. Go to novusordowatch.org, that's novusordowatch.org, to see why the new pope is not a true pope and how the modernist Vatican II sect differs from the Catholic Church. novusordowatch.org. Well, Your Excellency, Father, thank you for joining me today. We've had quite a week of work, haven't we?
Yes, we certainly have.
So you two weren't excitedly watching a chimney this week, were you?
No, we were too busy, actually. But, I mean, with a certain sense, you want to see what's going to go on. I mean, but we weren't watching it to say Viva il Papa, let's put it that way. It was really a curiosity to see which direction things were going to take among the modernists.
And obviously, that's the interest. It's going to be a significant event, no matter what you think of him, one way or another. Just by the fact that there are so many people who look to him as their leader.
One of the things that we talked about today in preparation for the show was that this candidate was ordained in the 1969 ordinal, and we knew enough time would pass after Vatican II to get us to this point one day. What are the implications of him being ordained in 1969?
Well, the Paul VI, as part of the post-Vatican II changes, actually legislated by the Second Vatican Council, changed the rights for the conferral of holy orders. Specifically, he changed the right for ordination to the diaconate, ordination to the priesthood, and for the episcopal consecration. And he changed them in such a way to compromise the validity of those rights, particularly the new right of episcopal consecration, which I've written on myself. And then, along with that, the form for the new rite of priestly ordination. So what this means is that the man who is elected by the conclave is not only a doubtful bishop, but also a doubtful priest. That is to say, as a result of this change in the sacramental form, that he may not possess the power of holy orders, and obviously that's a terrible thing. The non-bishop of Rome.
Well, and that's something, a theme that he's brought up himself. I think, Your Excellency, you noticed that in some of his early words, is the emphasis on the idea of bishop of Rome as opposed to Pope. And of course, we could say, as far as the Church teaches, there's no difference in his authority. But why do you think that might be a point of interest, or is it nothing?
Oh, no, it's very significant because it was repeated so much, and that has never been done before. That many cardinals do not come together to select a bishop of a diocese as if it were the Diocese of Squidunk, Illinois. They come together in order to pick the head of the whole church, and because St. Peter, who was the head of the whole church, died in Rome, Rome is the vehicle of this universal jurisdiction that the Pope receives. So Bishop of Rome is a very, in a way, secondary consideration to his role. He's elected as the universal pastor of the whole church with supreme jurisdiction and immediate jurisdiction over everyone in the whole church, transcending all the dioceses of the world. And so for him to be talking about Bishop of Rome as if he has a new diocese is very bizarre, and it is very ecumenical because it will please the Anglicans to hear him say Bishop of Rome. It will please the Greek Orthodox to hear him say Bishop of Rome because they have no trouble with Bishop of Rome. What they have trouble with is someone with universal jurisdiction over the whole church. And it is curious to note also that he referred to Ratzinger as the former Bishop of Rome. Now, we've been hearing retired Pope and Pope Emeritus, but this is, to call him the former Bishop of Rome as if he were the former Bishop of Squidunk, it is very, very significant, I think. You can see the ecumenist in him right away.
Yes,
it's a big shift.
You pay attention to the language that he uses. And it was evident from a number of other things connected with his little walkout onto the loggia there that he was trying to convey a message. But the business of the Bishop of Rome is not only appealing from the point of view of ecumenism to Protestants, to Anglicans, to schismatic Orthodox, but also to the real dyed-in-the-wool adepts of the new theology, the modernists within the conciliar establishment, who constantly try to play down the notion that, according to Catholic teaching, a pope is supposed to have universal ordinary jurisdiction. So my way of looking at it is that it was a really big deal, and it's an ecumenical and a theological message.
Yes, and I think it's a purposeful diminishing of the papacy. It's really a big step. I think you can see the fact that it was said so many times. It's a purposeful diminishing of the papacy, and it is to please the non-Catholics. Ratzinger gave a speech in the 1990s to Protestants in Rome, where he said, "I really don't know what the papacy will be like in the future. Who knows what it will become?" And you can see, I think, in this move, definitely an evolution. There's been an evolutionary leap. Now, I saw Cardinal Dolan talking about this man, and he was talking about this Bishop of Rome stuff. You'd never heard this before from people who just elected a pope. I mean, he did talk about the Pope too, but we elected this Bishop of Rome, and it was just very odd. And then he goes to the Church of St. Mary Major to visit the Salus Populi Romani, which is very nice. But again, you can see this emphasis on Rome, as if this is the limitation of his power, and that he. A lot of comments were made by him about assuming the leadership of Rome, as if it were just another diocese.
And what to my way of thinking ties it in a little more to the ecumenical aspect of it is his statement off the loggia, where he says to the people, "Let's start that journey which leads all the churches in charity." Of fraternity, of love, of trust, all the churches. I mean, you would never have heard someone like Pius XII say something like that. So we're getting it's like ecumenical code words that are being used.
Yeah, he is definitely an ecumenical maniac. You can tell from his activities in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, I was going to say, some people might say, Your Excellency, Father, he's not a real media savvy guy. This is his first couple days. Give him a break. You guys are just reading into the tea leaves. But as you say,
the mate leaves. He's
leaves, yes.
That's their equivalent of tea leaves down there. So
yes, it's quite good. But as you say, it isn't a matter of reading the mate leaves of today. He's actually got a long history, and that's the thing is in the media age, you can't have a stealth candidate anymore. We know everything about you, even just 24 hours after you assume command. And we have all sorts of ecumenical initiatives. In fact, I think one of the most interesting things we saw today was that he got a very warm welcome from Benai Briss, sent out a congratulatory email, and
he invited the head rabbi of Rome to the inauguration on the 19th.
Yes, but I don't think Benedict will be attending, interestingly enough. But the ex-bishop of Rome, whatever he might be called. But also Radio Cristianidad, which I'll send post a link to on Twitter, made a note of a prayer, and he's done some not just with the Jewish people, but with other religions. But in a particular prayer, he referred to asking for the help of his elder brothers in the faith, which of course we know that phrase. It's not an ancient phrase in Catholic tradition. It's a novel one. Where have we heard elder brothers in the faith before, Your Excellency and Father?
John Paul II, who said that the Jews are our elder brothers in the faith, and which is an insult to our Lord Jesus Christ, because the object of our faith is the divinity and messianic dignity of our Lord Jesus Christ. And to say that therefore they have the faith and actually are our elder brothers in the faith is an insult to Roman Catholicism and to the dogma of the divinity of Christ. So you can see very much that this man is heavily into ecumenism with the Jews. He has many contacts in his past with the Jews. He's lighting menorahs. He's engaging in the celebration of Hanukkah in a Jewish synagogue. There's videos of this that you can see on the internet. He is very his official biography was an approved biography was written by a Jewish man, Rubin. And so for some reason or other, he has a very close tie with the Jews and a very ecumenical tie with them, which is very troubling because obviously they do not even accept Christ. And how does the church become ecumenical with someone that doesn't accept Christ?
Well, you're ignoring the hermeneutic of continuity. I mean, you have to interpret that in the light of tradition, right? The Jews are elder brothers in the light of tradition, which of course solves everything.
Yes, just put that light of tradition like infrared or ultraviolet, and everything is fine.
You could see pictures of the some of the stuff that we're talking about, videos on the internet. His Hanukkah celebration. Maybe you should send that out on a Twitter feed too. But I mean, even to someone such as myself who has seen a lot, I mean, it's pretty shocking to see him with a kippah, which is the Jewish skull cap on, lighting candles with these people. I mean, that was just a black one, Father. I mean, that was normally his own, and he just wore a black one that day. That's not a Jewish one. So he wouldn't be recognized on the bus.
That's just a conspiracy. That's just a conspiracy.
He also had an ecumenical act. That's also the picture is also available on the internet, where he's kneeling down in front of many Protestant ministers, asking for their blessing and receiving their blessing. which is, I don't think even John Paul II did that. I mean, the great Koran kisser and the potion drinker and worshiping snakes and everything like that. I don't think even he did that. I think he got blessed by an American Indian, though. They waved a feather over him, but I never saw him actually do that. So this man is heavily into ecumenism. He is a radical ecumenist.
Yeah, it's not that sometimes when this happens, the level of one of the occupants of the Vatican, like JP2 or Paul VI, you get the kind of story that, well, the guy is a prisoner of his entourage, and, our beloved Holy Father is really trying to restore tradition or something like that, but these evil people around him, maybe in the Department of Ecumenism in the Vatican, are forcing this on him. But that argument can't be made here because Bergoglio, Francis, was doing this all on his own when he was the ordinary, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. So it's not a question of him having been forced into it by anyone else. This is knowingly and willingly.
Now, this is a big shift, too, from Ratzinger, who really did relatively little, almost nothing, in the way of outrageous ecumenical acts. CC3 was pretty low-key in comparison to a CC1, and then he prayed toward Mecca early in his non-reign, and there was some of that, but I think Ratzinger understood that was not a way in which to attract the traditionalists, and it gave too much ammunition to them in the sight of the people that there was definitely something wrong with Vatican II. So I think he had enough sense, and it was part of his traditionalist costume that he put on that he would refrain from such things. But this one, I think, is no holds barred. I think we're ready to see. We're back to kissing the Koran, I think. Yeah, I think this one makes JP2 and Ratzinger and Paul VI look like Thomas Aquinas and Torquemada put together.
No, it's and the thing is that even given about a day just to research this guy, all this stuff pops up. You've got him blessing and praising a parliament of the Argentine Parliament of Religions, and he's standing around with all of these odd characters. Someone who has become a Catholic, one of them a Catholic who's become some sort of a Mahatma, something like that. And you have him say, and that's in 2006. There are pagans involved. Then you get these pictures of him at an ecumenical Holocaust service in 2012. So this is just last year in the cathedral.
We had a Kristallnacht commemoration in the cathedral too. That was I believe it was 1938 when the Nazis broke all of the windows of the Jewish businesses in Germany, and they had a service with a lot of Jews there in the cathedral. So again, he's very active ecumenically, very, very active. And I saw in a comment from his biographer that this is not a quote from Bergoglio, but that in the opinion of this biographer, that he is not so interested in the differences of doctrine. What is important for him is that you get out to the people and you say to them what they want to hear. So, I think he's off the leash from the point of view of, that's saying a lot.
He's being praised for all of this by all sorts of horrible people. So there was a positive article, an anecdote about him that I read in the Wall Street Journal today, coming up here, where the Anglican Bishop of Buenos Aires, yes, there is such a thing, an Anglican Bishop of Buenos Aires, went over and had breakfast with Bergoglio. And they were talking at breakfast about this arrangement that Benedict XVI had made for Anglicans who wanted to come, some Anglicans who wanted to join up and still retain some of their own rights and practices. So Benedict XVI put together what was called an Anglican ordinariate, and on what we could say would be sort of the conservative side of the Novus Ordo Church, the post-Vatican II Church. This was really praised as great, that we're respecting these Anglican traditions, we're allowing these people to come in. But then Bergoglio told the Anglican bishop that this ordinariate receiving Anglicans corporately was really unnecessary, and that what the church really needed is the church needed them as Anglicans.
Yes, in the church.
So even discouraging the idea of conversion to the Novus Ordo Church.
Yes. So now, don't forget the Anglicans have women priests and women bishops, and they have homosexual bishops. You have to think about all of that.
Well, anything you can do, they can do better, Your Excellency. Remember, that's what they're going to say.
Yeah. All of the whole baggage that goes with that is, absolutely astounding. And so he's saying, no problem.
And I'm just reflecting that you all have been around the game a very long time, so to shock either of you is a pretty big deal. I mean, I grew up in Vatican II, so this is all sort of old hat to me. But to shock you two, I think that's a pretty big deal. I think we can say Paul VI has returned with force.
Even with the ugly vestments and the ugly pectoral cross, Paul VI loved everything that was ugly. I mean, if it was ugly, he had it. And so many beautiful things in the Vatican were put away or changed. I mean, you have this ugliness here and there in St. Peter's Basilica as a result of Paul VI's horrid taste. So, and you see he refused the pectoral cross that was offered to him, and he has this iron thing that looks like a beer can opener, which all of the modernists wear. You can always tell what a bishop is like by looking at his pectoral cross. You can tell whether he's a conservative modernist or a progressive liberal. And this one has a pectoral cross that really qualifies for the super progressive liberal. The fact that it's made of iron, I think, really says a lot. And that he refused that, and he also refused the Mercedes-Benz, and he wanted to get in an ordinary car. And we're going to see a big flood, I think, of the era of Paul VI and the destroying of the icons and iconoclasm and the return of horrid taste and modern taste. I really think you're going to see that. I think somebody pointed out that Marini, who was a big liturgical conservative and was, I think, the master of ceremonies or something of Ratzinger,
for P16, like that.
And that he had the Paul VI surplice back on, that the lace was off, and the Paul VI modernist surplice was back. And then the Sistine Chapel Mass this morning was in the facing the people, and everything was back to normal with the horrible vestments.
It was, again, it was like the time of Paul VI. And over the past couple of years, people were talking about how Benedict XVI was, a man of good taste and reforming the reform and rebuilding the liturgy slowly. Brick by brick, as Father Zulsdorf used to say. Well, I mean, this guy was perfectly happy to throw a couple bricks through the window this morning. Well, I mean, he had.
I think the wall came down like the walls of Jericho today. Or
yeah, I mean, it was the Paul VI vestments. We're back to the Paul VI vestments. Now, mind you, I don't. The thing is that is not my primary concern. Okay, that he's wearing ugly vestments. It's that it is symbolic of what's going on.
Yes.
And so the message that's being clearly conveyed is that we're not going to take put sort of the traditional spin on the liturgy that Benedict XVI did. We're going to go back to the simple Paul VI stuff.
And the John Paul II stuff.
And the John Paul II stuff. And and we are telegraphing a message to the people and a message to the world by doing that. And he sure did that. I just watched a clip of the Sistine Chapel Mass this morning, and that's what you get. None of this business about facing east, having the Mass facing the crucifix that Benedict XVI had in the Sistine Chapel. We're back to Paul VI. We're back. That's where I think we are.
And that makes me happy because Benedict was very difficult to show to the people, the Catholic people, as a modernist because he was wearing a traditionalist costume. And people judge by appearances. And you had to explain all of his rather obtuse theology in order to show that he was a real radical modernist. But this fellow will make it very easy for us.
Yeah, it'll be what you see is what you get. And I think that that's computer language. It's WYSIWYG or something. So it's what you see is what you get with this guy. And so he's given us the signals. When you talked about right away the coverage this morning about what was going on talked about these little details as significant, as signals. So there's John Tavis, that's Thavis, who is a Vatican correspondent who was very well connected in the Vatican and just put out a book on it. He was commenting he has a blog for some news service, and he got the word that right after Bergoglio was elected and went to be invested, they tried to get him to put on the traditional vestments. Normally you would put on white cassock, and you would put on a vestment called a mossetta, that's a red cape. You put a stole on over that because that symbolizes the Pope having universal jurisdiction. He's the only person who can wear a stole all the time if he wants. And this guy refused, looked at the pectoral cross and said no, he wanted to keep the simple one. He wasn't going to wear the mozzetta. So he just came out in wearing a cassock and his little sort of beer bottle opener pectoral cross. And then what you're supposed to do, even according to the Novus Ordo rites, is whoever is elected is supposed to sit down on the throne, which is the symbol of papal authority, and the cardinals are supposed to come up one by one and make a sign of obedience to him and get the kiss of peace from them. But this guy wasn't going to sit down on the throne. No, he was going to stand up for this because he had the idea that he's going to show how humble he is.
Yes.
So, you get details like that. And the thing is that it doesn't, these are details, but they're signals.
Yeah,
they're signals of what is going on in his little head.
And that's a theme we're going to see repeated and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we get on, about this theme of humility. I think this is going to be a motif that we're going to see over and over. We've seen it early. For those of you who are joining us now, or just joining us, you are listening to Restoration Radio. Our topic today is Habemus Papam, ? And we were talking about the newest claimant to the post-Vatican II papacy, Francis. And I'm joined by His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn and Father Anthony Cekada. And we're learning that pectoral crosses are not just a sign of your taste in art, but also what kind of alcoholic beverage you prefer. I think His Excellency is convinced.
Well, let's be fair to him. He's Argentina. It would be that mate. It would be that tea.
Yes.
So,
but it is a sign of your theology. It very much is a sign of your theology.
Yeah, right. You're conveying something. You're conveying something with that.
Yeah.
humility theme that we were talking about, this is also something that John Cavis and a whole bunch of people have been talking about. So the leader for an Associated Press article that talked about this business of him, refusing a fancy pectoral cross and standing up to receive the obedience. The first sentence said, Pope Francis put his humility on display during his first day as pontiff. And I don't know if they realize the irony of that, but if you really have humility, you don't put it on display.
Yeah. Well, we got a message from Twitter. Novus Ordo Watch suggested "superbis humilitatis nee" as the watchword of this papacy. For those of you not familiar with your Latin, that means "proud of my humility." If you're following along on Twitter, I've been posting I've been trying to keep up with His Excellency and Father, who've been giving you a lot of really great information. I posted the photo and the story behind the blessing on his knees from Protestant ministers in 2006. I've linked to the video of him celebrating Hanukkah in an ecumenical service. I've put a link to the original in Spanish of his prayer referencing asking for the Jews as his elder brothers in the faith to pray for him. And I've also put out, again, another sign that we've gone back to Paul VI without the conspiracy theories or the long ears, a balloon backdrop to a recent mass that he did. And we really, clown masses, it's been a long time. It's almost a retro at this point to bring in the balloon masses, and we've got a photo of that posted as well.
Yeah, a balloon says so much. One balloon is worth 30 books of Ratzinger. It just says so much about the man. I don't think even JP2 used balloons. I think when you think of the sacredness of the Catholic Mass, when you think of, for example, a Catholic solemn high Mass in a magnificent cathedral before the council, and the sacredness of that, the idea of having balloons it's just something, it's blasphemous and sacrilegious that you would bring balloons in as if it's some sort of a party. And this just says everything, that just the appearance of one balloon at a liturgical celebration means that the man is also off the liturgical rails, that he is a radical leftist from the point of view of liturgy. If you see the video, too, it's on the internet, of the children's mass that he celebrated not too long ago in Buenos Aires. It's a shocker from the point of view of liturgy. It has. Yeah,
what you have is I went and looked at it as the sort of liturgical policeman of this operation, and it was a kids' mass, a children's mass, celebrated according to the children's directory that Bugnini cooked up in the 70s. And what among the different features you have is you naturally have pop-type music and guitars. And that's sort of noise and singing pop type of music. And then you have these young ladies sort of dancing back and forth to get the kids to sing along with the music at different points. And so they're sort of gyrating back and forth and clapping. You get the clapping and rhythm during the Mass. You get the sort of the odd altarware that they use, the metal chalices that look like some sort of a gunmetal, and then a paten that looks like
the pizza host. The
pizza
host.
And so there's all this stuff, and then he is singing, or they're doing this children's mass canon, and there's this text that the celebrant is supposed to read, and then it's interspersed. So he's reading this, and this is interspersed with these guitar refrains sung by the kids and clapping, and then at a certain point, then the balloons are let loose, like lots of balloons.
Yes.
So it's it is
sacred balloons.
Sacred balloons, yeah. It is so absolutely bizarre, from the point of view of Catholic worship. And you say that objectively, if you have standards, something like that is so disrespectful. It's blasphemous. It makes such a light of what's supposed to be
there's no provision to say, like, let these balloons rise to you like an evening sacrifice.
I think that's one of the options.
I think they're work of human breath.
Yeah.
I know an excellent book that's close to that title. Yeah.
I've heard that the author is a troublemaker. So.
Yes. I want to. Can I get into a little bit of inside baseball with you, Your Excellency and Father? Because we noted that all of the cardinals who participated in this so-called conclave were appointed by either JP2 or Benedict XVI, and that it came out that that Francis was the main opposition candidate, not just a regular opposition candidate, but sponsored by our good friend Cardinal Martini. The swing then represents that not only did he keep the 1/3 that he had in the 2005 conclave, but he managed to bring over 1/3 of Ratzinger's side over to him. So he's definitely a consensus candidate, perhaps. What are your thoughts on that swing?
Well, you have to, first of all, I guess we have to tell people a little bit about Cardinal Martini. It's Martini, like the drink, not Montini.
Yeah, he's related to that family too, the Martini and Rossi.
Really?
Yes. So there is a connection to the drink there.
I'll drink to that.
He's dead now, though. Martini died recently.
Okay, so what? He was also a Jesuit, and he was a standard run-of-the-mill modernist theologian who was in favor of all sorts of crazy things, and
including homosexuals living together.
For one, and there's a whole list of things that we came up with once about him. But in any event, he was the darling of the modernists, who really who were sick of JP2, etc., and they had hope that he would be elected. Well, in the 2005 conclave, I guess that the thought of electing him was a little bit too much, but his man was Bergoglio, now Francis. So he was the candidate of the people who did not support Ratzinger, who did not want to support Ratzinger.
He was like the Democrat.
Yes. So what happened is that Ratzinger during the intervening years appointed more cardinals, but then you would think that they would have voted for someone according to the Ratzingerian mindset. Someone who would have carried on this sort of appearance of the hermeneutic of continuity and tradition and liturgical splendor and so on. But they didn't. They voted for someone who is the antithesis, who seems to be the antithesis of that. He's almost like an anti-Ratzinger.
Yes. That is a shock. It shows how unpopular Ratzinger's policies were. This is a slap in the face to Ratzinger's policies. And I'm sure Ratzinger is not happy with the choice. I'm sure he is not. Because I think Ratzinger knows enough that if Vatican II is going to survive, it has to have the costume of traditionalism. Yes. And this will worry him that this man will do crazy, outlandish things and will destroy Vatican II all the more.
Well, I mean, you have to imagine the Fraternity St. Peter and the Society of St. Pius X will be excited because you have to imagine they're getting rid of all of Benedict's Baroque investments and they'll be going on eBay and then they'll give that money to the poor. Just like Paul VI sold his tiara, to give money to the poor. We'll get rid of all of those vestments. So, I mean, it's going to be a fire sale. Your Excellency, you might want to be checking eBay.
There'll be a glut.
Yeah, there will be a glut.
No, it is a big seismic shift. And the neocons must be, in tears tonight because their world has come to a swift end and it's smashed in this man.
And the ones right away, some of them were quite realistic about it, that it was that this guy's a disaster. In fact, Rorate Caeli, which has a large neocon following and supports the motu proprio mass, etc., and kind of traditional ideas, and was a big pro-Benedict XVI site. The first article it published about the man said the horror of it, and they published an extremely critical article by an Argentine journalist outlining some of the really awful things that Bergoglio had done down there. So some of them. Yes,
and there was another article concerning the Summorum Pontificum. I looked at Rorate a little later, and a detailed description of how that was implemented. It was, there was some talk, he implemented it right away, and 2 weeks later they had a mass. Well, it was once a month in some obscure place, and it was said by modernists, and this is what the Argentinian priests told us here too, that they assigned modernist priests to say it, and that they did not use the traditional epistle and gospels, but used the Novus Ordo lectionary and read them to the people as if it were a Novus Ordo mass. So they got this half-breed. I mean, it wasn't anything. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't Novus Ordo. Just this, this half-breed thing. And that most of the people who went to it were turned away. That there were hundreds of people that showed up for it, and now there's just a few people. That's on Rorate. You can read that. So that was his way of implementing Summorum Pontificum, and that Buenos Aires does not have a motu mass now. I mean, there was another part of the article saying that you can't find a motu mass in Buenos Aires.
Would it be fair to say, Your Excellency, that humanly speaking, Summorum Pontificum is finished?
Well, I don't know what he's going to do, but certainly. It's a shift in the whole outlook. Ratzinger had this policy of putting the traditional costume on Vatican II. That was something that defined his whole attempt at a papacy. And there's a shift now. I mean, how he will deal with it, I don't know. But, I mean, if he deals with it in the same way he dealt with it in Buenos Aires, I think it's the end of Summorum Pontificum. Yeah,
because they with Ratzinger in place, since he promulgated it, and in a certain sense, you could say by having all the traditionalist decorations for the Novus Ordo, he encouraged these ideas at least indirectly. Because people in the indult and in the motu proprio world looked to him and said, see, this is good. Everything's are being reformed brick by brick. Now they can't say that. I mean, the traditional fig leaf is off, and we're back to Vatican II.
Yes, the naked
glory.
We have a comment on Twitter from one of those neocons you're referring to, Father, and Your Excellency.
Okay.
A euphemism, dear brother, euphemism. Fainting is a polite way to put a word on my actual feelings.
Yes, it must be a bad day for them. I mean, they were so built up by their hopes in Ratzinger. It just this I'm sure just dashes everything that they were ever hoping for. I'm sure they were looking for another Ratzinger that was even more so, like Ratzinger, but more so. And they got Paul VI, essentially, or worse.
It must be a terrible and a bitter disappointment to them. But, it goes back to the problem once more that all of this stuff grew out of Vatican II. It's all back to the council. And, I can see people coming into this at a certain point and putting their hopes in some sort of a step-by-step gradual restoration. And that was sort of the matrix that they imposed on what Benedict XVI was doing. So we said Father Zulsdorf saying brick by brick, it was being rebuilt. But then it can't be really built on a solid foundation because there's still Vatican II in the background. And it's these things that we're talking about, the false ecumenism and the bizarre ideas on non-Catholic religions and the liturgical abuses. All of these things are rooted in the bad principles, the false teachings, the ambiguities, and the equivocations of Vatican II. I mean, you could, given probably 3 minutes with the Vatican II Constitution on the liturgy, I could justify the balloon masses for you. Because you can read Vatican II one way and then the other, and that's the diabolical advantage of it.
And
we were saying earlier,
you mentioned at the table this morning, it always goes back to Vatican II, doesn't it?
Yes, Vatican II is the problem. The document there's going to be hope in the church. The documents of Vatican II must be burned. And then things will be set aright. Until they are burned and publicly repudiated, everything will be wrong. And, that's the simple reality. But the hope of the neocons would be that he retire. And we were saying this morning that he could retire with Ratzinger in that house behind the Vatican, and then we could call it Papal Estates. And that you'll have this retirement home for popes or bishops of Rome or whatever, white Catholic people anyway. And they could be taken out on buses to Atlantic City in a white bus. And
does the Vatican Bank issue the checks on the 1st and the 15th of the month? Is that when they'll head out?
That's when they'd get it.
And then in his humility, in his discreet humility, he doesn't want to get into a Mercedes-Benz, so we were speculating that he might go around on a moped, which is very common in Rome. And Father Cekada said, well, then you would have to call it a poped.
Puns are the lowest form of humor. What can I say?
For those of you who are joining our apparently comedian stand tonight, we are Restoration Radio, our show Habemus Papam on Francis, on the new claimant to the post-Vatican II papacy. Our guests are His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn and Father Anthony Cekada. And I suppose then your answer to those neocons that are sad tonight is reach for the closest pectoral cross, open up a beer, and it'll get a little better.
Well, yes. I mean, Stephen, we really don't want to be cruel, but the thing is that you have to be realistic. I guess my message to them is you have to be realistic about what the source of the trouble is. And, you have to figure out what it really is. And it really is Vatican II. It's not its interpretation. It's not the wrong hermeneutic of rupture instead of, of continuity and consistency with tradition. It's not the interpretation. It's Vatican II itself that's inflicted so many problems on Catholics of goodwill, and then will continue to do so because what Francis is doing is equally justified under the Vatican II principles as what Ratzinger is doing.
No, ecumenism is Vatican II.
Yeah,
and that's the problem is saying effectively that the Catholic Church is not the one true church outside of which there is no salvation. It is saying that the non-Catholic religions are means of salvation. This is heresy. And for as long as that heresy is in place in the Vatican buildings, you're going to have major, major trouble. You're going to have a perversion of what those buildings are meant to represent and what the people in them are meant to represent. It's turning it upside down and perverting it.
Yes, and the idea of the message of running down, which this fellow seems to do, running down the dignity of the papacy, and the idea of the reduction to the Bishop of Rome, and that is traced back to Vatican II and collegiality.
Yes.
And to all of the different actions with Paul VI and his successors that flowed from that. So
and
that's
to
why we're
ecumenism
getting
itself. And the balloons go back to the document on the liturgy.
Sure.
All the adaptations that are and all of the post-Vatican II official reforms. This is not abuse by local bishops. These are official reforms that were approved under Paul VI. The Children's Mass and all of these adaptations and enculturation, all of these things, and Father Cekada pointed those out in his book. All this goes back to Vatican II and official acts of these Vatican II non-popes. And until that is solved, there is no hope for anything. And if there's one lesson for the neocons to learn, I think it's that the momentary paradise of Ratzinger is gone, and now they're out in the diaspora.
Yeah, you can't go into sort of what you would call the hermeneutic of denial. Now that this stuff is really going on, and Bishop Sanborn and I both know from our own experiences trying to fight these modernists 35 years ago in the modernist seminaries, how fruitless an exercise it is to say that Vatican II is being misinterpreted, because we tried the same stuff and it didn't work. Because
yes, I went through that in the 1960s, thinking that Paul VI was the bulwark of orthodoxy and it was the bad bishops and the bad priests. I went through that when I was a teenager.
Sure, Your Excellency. We all had to do it. We all had to, buy the prisoner of the Vatican narrative. You weren't the first, and unfortunately, you won't be the last until the hermeneutic of denial is broken.
He was a weak pope, and he didn't, he couldn't do what he wanted to do and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the wicked American bishops. They were frustrating his every move to restore dignity to worship and orthodoxy and so on. And
he didn't actually take the time to suppress a small Swiss congregation.
Well, this was when we were in the diocesan seminary. This is what we were thinking. That if he only knew what was going on, and he was just held in a sacrosanct position. Because he was the Pope, and the Pope, by definition, is a person who assures the orthodoxy of the Catholic Church, which is, of course, true. But the neocons of today are still in that mode that we broke out of in the late 60s and early 70s. Because reality presented itself that Paul VI was not a weak person, and he was the one that concocted all of this nonsense, and that his liberalism and modernism goes back to the time when he was an early priest in the 1920s, a young priest. He had a horrible career as a modernist. And when you do the research and you see this, you say, well, these people are corrupt. They're doctrinally corrupt and liturgically corrupt. And they're giving us the contagion that is in their own dark souls.
Well, Your Excellency and Father, you've lit up the phone line, so even though we're not quite at the halfway point, and I haven't given the number out, we've got over 10 callers in the queue. So,
are there any balloons connected with those lights? That's what I want to know.
Oh, goodness, we're having too much fun. You're listening to Restoration Radio. Our show tonight, Habemus Papam, on Francis, on the post-Vatican II claimant, Francis. Our guests are His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn and Father Anthony Cekada. If you'd like to call and chat with either of these validly ordained clerics, you can call in at 949-272-9417. Again, that's 949-272-9417. Michael from Washington, hopefully I think your question is probably a little more tame, but I think you had a question about the election.
Yeah. I was just thinking, who did you guys think would be the potential, who did you guys think would get elected as Pope?
It was wide open. I had no idea who would get elected. No idea at all. It was wide open.
Because there wasn't a lot of actual media coverage on the potential candidates this time round, I noticed. Like, if you remember, last time they had a lot of coverage on the Bishop from South Africa, and I think he was actually in contention for it this year, and a lot of, there wasn't a lot of hype about the potential candidates.
No, it was very, perhaps more than in any other time. It was wide open. And because there's so many factions now, even among the modernists, there's some very conservative ones, very liberal ones, moderate ones. There's factions among the bishops and factions among the clergy. It's a very divided.
Well, I'd like to address that question though about knowing, sort of knowing in advance. If you look at, I think, pretty much the conclaves for nearly for the previous century, it was going into it, everyone pretty much had an idea of, or educated guess of who would be elected. But this one, as Bishop Sanborn said, there were in fact so many factions, and even the press divided them into sort of three different, the cardinals into sort of three different groups in terms of their interest. So it was a hard one to predict and a hard one to figure out. What the guess a little bit, at least as far as I was concerned, was that they would be somewhat cautious and go with someone who had some of the Ratzingerian ideas. But it didn't turn out that way.
No, I think it's indicative that there is a strong anti-Ratzinger movement and feeling. I thought you would get more of the same, a smoothie that would placate everyone and be rather conservative theologically. But no, this is a bit of a shock to me that they would choose such a man.
Yeah. We have a question from Brian. I think, is it Bryant or Brian from New York?
Bryant.
Brian, you have a question about Argentina in relation to this papacy.
Correct. I wanted to talk about the new pope and how he's coming from South America. I know there hasn't been any new popes from outside Europe in over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. So my question was, do you think the difference in geography affects the decision of the pope because religion in different parts of the world emphasize different points?
Yes, I do. I think that South America is the last stronghold for the Novus Ordo. Right. The faith is completely ruined in Europe. There's hardly anybody in the churches in Europe now. Those magnificent churches are just empty, and they use them for concerts. And I mean, there's a few elderly ladies that you see in these churches. And North America is on its way to that. Most of the people going to Mass in North America have gray hair. Right. The young people, with some exceptions, are not going to Mass, to the Novus Ordo Mass. So this whole swath of the North Atlantic is gone for them, or they, if not gone, it's going quickly, and it's no longer a stronghold. They see South America as the future of the Novus Ordo religion. But, I think that's pretty short-lived, too, because the Protestants have made a lot of inroads, particularly in Brazil, which is a huge country, and also in other South American countries, Bolivia and Peru. It is no longer, or at least it may no longer be for them what they hope for it to be. And I think this election of a South American is the hope that this will at least create a final stronghold for the Novus Ordo.
The commentators today, though, even pointed out that the tremendous, even though that it is considered more vital, certainly than Europe is, that compared to what it was at the time of Vatican II, it is greatly diminished.
No, I'm here. I think Brian had his radio turned on. Brian, if you had another question or a follow-up, feel free to call, and we'll move you back up to the top of the queue. I think there was some you might have had your radio on in the background. So remember, when you're on call in the hold queue, you're listening to the show in real time. And if you have it on in the background, it's got about a 1-minute delay. So just remember that when you are being introduced. Our next caller, so I guess that, Brian, if you'd like, you can come back and give us a call. Our next caller is Daniel, calling from Indiana, and he's got a question on the, Cardinal Jorge.
Hi, how are you guys doing this evening?
Pretty good, Daniel. So what's your question?
So I've been really sick lately and unable to watch the news. I found out that the new Pope had been elected, so I just wanted to know, what had been. I just wanted to know what his earlier life was like, and before he became Pope.
Well, he was born in the 30s, correct? And his background is Argentine. He is a member of the Jesuit order, and it takes you a long time to become a priest in the Jesuit order. Was it like 13 years or something after high school, something like that? It's quite a bit longer than the normal course. So he was ordained in 1969. And before that, probably what you did typically as a Jesuit is that you did a novitiate, and there were other different stages that you did. You would make vows, and then you would generally be you'd receive a certain amount of education. You'd be sent to teach at a Jesuit high school, and eventually you'd finish up your seminary studies, and you'd be ordained. So he was ordained in about 69, and subsequent to that, he did educational work. He ended up, I believe, as the rector of Jesuit Seminary Scholasticate. And one thing we were not able to determine today, because of the dearth of immediately available information, is what he did in the way of whether or not he got a doctoral degree in theology, because that would tell us, his thesis, what he wrote about, would tell us quite a bit. We know that he taught literature and psychology. And then eventually taught theology. So that's sort of a general outline of his background.
Oh, okay.
We have another call from Jason from New York, and he's got two questions. Jason, go ahead.
Hi, Your Excellency and Father Cekada. Glad to talk to you. I really love your work. First of all, I'm at the CMRI site a lot, and listen to a lot. I read a lot of traditionalist literature, but I have two questions. The first one is about, you talked about running down the papacy. I was wondering if there's, I've just realized how they actually been doing this, like giving up the tiara and everything. I was just wondering if that could indicate a move more towards devolving authority away from the papacy and away from Rome. Yes.
Absolutely. That has been the idea of the modernists since the 18th century, to make the papacy something like the British monarchy, just a figurehead. Absolutely, yes. And yes, so Benedict's refusal of the tiara, well, first of all, John Paul II's refusal of it at the inauguration and refusal to call it a coronation. Then you had Benedict refusing the tiara in his coat of arms. And now this one refuses yet more things. I mean, you see a pattern. You can see it's clearly planned.
Are they planning? I'm sorry, go ahead.
The idea of devolved authority was extremely popular with the modernists around the time of Vatican II. And there was a shift to decentralize authority, the power to make decisions, from the Vatican to the conferences of bishops. formerly, the way that things operated in the Catholic country is you had the authority of the Pope and the Roman congregations, and then you had the individual bishops. After Vatican II, you got this idea that you would have national conferences of bishops. And the modernists saw this as a way to devolve authority, to take authority away from the authority in effect away from the Holy See. And what they would do, so you see in many of the Vatican II documents, especially in the question of the sacred liturgy, all of these different decisions being left to bishops' conferences, because that was seen as the new way to go.
And that's always in the interest of ecumenism. It's always behind it. Paul VI said the greatest obstacle to ecumenism is the papacy. So obviously the papacy has to go if ecumenism is to stay.
Is this a way of finally getting those countries and regions that want, the traditional litany of horrors, instituted into the faith? Is this a way of getting like gay marriage, like in the U.S., getting, female priests, in other parts of the world, or is that impossible to do if the Holy See still exists? I'm not clear on that.
You never know what they're going to do and what their ideas are. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this one does some pretty outlandish things. But you don't know. There is no point of reference for them. Who knows?
Yeah. Jason, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, I guess I just wondered what the next step in the actual regional bodies or the national conferences being able to make very important decisions,
Stay tuned.
What would
that's all you can say is
yeah.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something with that. We'll see what he does. But yeah, I mean, if he keeps referring to himself as Bishop of Rome, he might really be looking, as you're talking about, at more devolved powers.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just was reading. I did not know this, but Benedict refused to say that he was the Patriarch of the West as well.
No, he got rid of that title.
Yeah,
he got rid of it.
Yeah.
He dumped it, which is a very ancient title, and of course is the corollary to whatever the Eastern patriarchs claim. It's a very important role if you want to breathe with both lungs. Which Father had mentioned that you want to talk about a real ecumenical move. I mean, this guy might put another. He was the patriarch of. Was he the patriarch? He was head of the Eastern Catholics in Argentina, and he actually only has one lung, interestingly enough. And if you want to breathe with both lungs of the church, just as an expression of the post-Vatican II popes, then he might get a lung just for that.
And in that regard, I noticed in that video of the children's mass that he was a little breathy.
Yes.
I noticed that he was talking in a high voice, obviously, and he was slightly breathy. So he may not be, have all the health that they think he does, and he may not be able to keep up. And then he can move into the papal estates part.
Yeah.
Jason, thanks
Get on
for
the
calling.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Can I have one more question?
A very brief one. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Just in his biography, he's associated with Communion and Liberation Movement, and that was started by Luigi Giussani. Do you know anything about that, and can you talk about that? That's
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Father, you want to talk about liberation theology, or Your Excellency, who would like to take that one?
Liberation theology is essentially Marxism with a Christian sauce on it. And this Mr. B, as I call him, Bergoglio, he is very heavily into Marxism and socialism too. His practically all he talks about is social issues and alleviation of the sufferings of the poor, but not in the way that the church understands that, but in the way that Marxists and socialists understand it. So, and also it had that Communion and Liberation has the one of its doctrines is that you need Jesus essentially in order to be a perfect person. this is typical of modernist theology, that you have a need for the supernatural. You have a need of the Christian faith in order to perfect yourself. And this is the entire idea of Gaudium et Spes, that the church is hooking up with the modern idea of perfecting itself socially and personally and economically. In other words, a whole new world order. And the church is inserting itself in this to give it a spiritual aspect. That's very much part of communion liberation.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You can look that up on the internet, though. Communion liberation.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Well, we actually made it through a call without anything.
Without hitting the squelch button.
Maybe you should get one of those boop boop.
Right. Have a little. I could do a little clown noise. I could make a little big shoe noise. John from Missouri, Father Cekada, do you think that you'll get more parish growth because of people being disgusted with the new Pope? John, is that your question?
Hello, Stephen, Your Excellency, Father. Actually, I'm from New Jersey, not Missouri.
Okay, New Jersey. Go ahead.
It's kind of a twofold question. Since you, Father Cekada, since you've been in Ohio for the last 20 or something years, have you gotten a steady increase of people coming over from the indult crowd? And the second part of that is, do you expect growth now because of the neocons that you were talking about before? Do you think this will be a catalyst to see a movement away from the indult crowd towards your type of parishes?
Well, that's a good question. We have gotten over the years that I've been here some people who have come over from the indult and from the motu proprio mass. That it's as a result of reading and looking at the issues and so on. But it's not by any means an enormous growth, because for those people to step outside of what they would perceive as the diocesan structure is very difficult for them. So that's the answer to the first part of the question. The answer to the second part is that this development with Bergoglio being elected is something that I certainly hope would be a wake-up call for a lot of these people who really haven't thought about these issues. And if they're confronted with someone who really is gung-ho on putting into effect his particular spin on Vatican II, I think yes in the long run. But I don't think it's going to be an instantaneous thing, because it does take people a while to figure things out. They have to get out of the idea, they have to figure out from what this man does that, it takes really more than a white cassock to be a pope.
Yes, I think it's an excruciatingly difficult act for someone who has accepted the whole idea of the motu proprio to make the decision that there is no hope of any Catholicism from what they perceive as the Catholic Church, what we say is the Novus Ordo. That is a very difficult decision for them, but I do think that, not to make a pun, but I think that their balloon has been broken by this election, and they're doing some serious thinking, I'm sure.
What happens is, and as I say, having to a certain extent been in that position myself and trying to justify what is going on in the Vatican II Church and remain part of it and interpret things conservatively, I can say that I understand that, and also it was the people who are in the motu proprio and indult movement, I think now will feel justifiably quite a bit more isolated, because so many of them don't think that the new form of worship is Catholic anyway, and they reject picking and choosing certain of the new doctrines that they maybe accept and others that they reject. But I think they're going to feel more isolated now. And in fact, they are more isolated because the mask is off.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. And I disagree slightly with that there's a rejection of the Novus Ordo, because my experience is I've found a lot of people in the monoproprial world
Mm-hmm.
to have cozied up to the Novus Ordo, especially under Benedict XVI. They feel they've let down their guard, and and now there's it's now an abrupt change of scenery, so to speak.
I think most of them, though, would refuse to attend the Novus Ordo Mass in principle, that it is not a Catholic rite. At least that's what they would feel in their hearts. They may not say it or think it or permit themselves to say it or think it, but in their hearts, I think they avoid that Novus Ordo as if it were just not a Catholic rite. That's what I think Father means by that.
Yes, and what you say, though, is the fact that Benedict XVI was making so many what seemed to be traditional type moves to them, that they took obviously quite a bit of encouragement and figured that, well, maybe in some circumstances it might not be so bad after all.
Yes.
But that will change, I think.
Yes.
John, thanks for your call.
Thank
you.
And for those of you listening, in your hearts, you know that Bishop Sanborn is right.
I think they said that about Goldwater, didn't they?
Because people are old enough to remember that.
Yeah, that dates me and a lot of other people.
Well, I knew Your Excellency. I was hoping there'd be some people who would also. We are taking a couple questions from Twitter. I guess a first one is a comment. Brian let us know that for the audience with the Cardinals on Friday, the Pope instructed them to wear plain black cassocks.
No.
He's got a New York Times link to it. So for those of you who are, I'm going to retweet that.
That's what
now.
Napoleon did.
Really?
Is it? Yes. Yes, to the recalcitrant cardinals that wouldn't go along with his program, he put them all in black.
Yeah, the headline is, with simple actions and dress, new Pope shifts tone at Vatican. He wore simple black shoes and an ordinary wristwatch. And this goes back to what he's trying to do. Brian, thanks for that. We'll retweet that.
Oh, that's going to cause, I think, some friction, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, of course.
We might be in for a Great Western Schism. Number two.
Because the thing is, again, if something like that is true, that's symbolic. Yeah. And the type of symbolism that conveys is not going to go over with everyone.
No.
Because, you can push certain things. But in terms of the compromise candidate and so on. But I'm sure that there'd be a real divergency of ideas on that.
Yes. Now he might irritate people beyond the measure, and you might see some sparks.
Yeah, it's just be very interested to read that one.
Yes.
So if you ship that link to me, I'll take it.
Yes.
Absolutely. The second question comes from the Precision Department in Novus Ordo Watch.
Okay.
By resigning, did Benedict XVI give an ideal preparation for Francis's final dagger into the papacy?
That's a good question. I thought of that. I mean, is this planned by Ratzinger? Is this all part of the whole scheme to ruin the papacy? I thought of that. I don't know. It's all secret, but I think it has certainly worthy of speculation.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it certainly is, because it's it's the sort of thing that would really do it after the Ratzinger years.
Yeah. But you see this progress from one to the other, the progress of the destruction of the Catholic faith little by little. But I think we're going to see quite an acceleration of it in this one.
For those of you who are just joining us, you're listening to Restoration Radio. Our topic today is Habemus Papam, ? And we're talking about Francis, the latest claimant to the post-Vatican II papacy. If you'd like to submit questions on Twitter, like some of the questions we just read, just go to twitter.com and type in our handle @TrueRestoration. Leave your question, and it will come up in our feed. Then you don't have to wait on hold. If you are trying to call in, the telephone number to call in is 949-272-9417. And our next caller is John from Wisconsin. He's got 2 questions regarding, I think, the canon of the Mass. John, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Good evening, Your Excellency, Father Cekada, Stephen.
Hi.
The 2 questions, real quick, are since all the cardinals in the conclave, and you kind of touched it a little bit, were all made by modernist popes, how come this election even registers in the traditional movement? And my other question is more geared towards the society of Pius X, that since none of these last quotation mark popes were condemned to be heretical by the church itself, wouldn't it technically be that you could put one of these popes in the canon by a priest if he was not sure if he was the pope, and he would still actually give graces to the laity and to himself?
Number one is despite whatever theory you hold about election and so forth, the fact that these people are purporting to be popes and have a tremendous influence over people who profess to be Catholic means that in a certain way it affects everybody. And so even though we hold, Father Cekada and I hold that he's no more the Pope than your mailman, we might see less of him as time goes on, but nevertheless, because he's in those positions and he is seen by the world as the successor of St. Peter, it affects us, and therefore we have to deal with it. That's the answer to number one. I can't remember the second. About una cum. You can't live in doubt about the identity of the Roman Pontiff. The Roman Pontiff, your obedience and submission to the Roman Pontiff is necessary for salvation. So you can't say, I don't know. You have to resolve the doubt in the practical order by saying, I'm going to act toward him as if he is, or I'm going to act toward him as if he isn't. Otherwise, you would commit a very grave sin of being indifferent toward him. You can't be indifferent toward the Roman Pontiff because you owe him obedience, or you owe him rejection if he is a false Roman Pontiff. But you can't be in the middle. And therefore, a priest who's in doubt would have to reconcile it one way or the other. And it is very easy to reconcile it and to find out the facts and to verify the fact that he is not the Roman Pontiff. It's very easy to do if you just do your homework and have an open mind. So the Una Cum Mass and reciting the name of the heretic in the Mass is something sacrilegious and must be avoided by all priests and lay people.
Well, even if, since he hasn't been technically condemned by the true church, that all things that seem to have come up in the teachings of the church, and I could be wrong, but that seems to be consistent that unless he's formally condemned, like I know back in the 1400s, there was a bishop that was heretical. He was warned, he was excommunicated, and the priests that continued to put him in the canon of the Mass, they were threatened with excommunication. But if it wasn't for the formal decree that he was excommunicated, those priests would have been in the right. That's where I'm posing the question.
I think I discussed that case in and this general issue in the article that I wrote on this called "The Grain of Incense," and okay. I think that was one of the objections that I addressed. Most most heretics and schismatics are not formally condemned by the church. And but the general rule is that one way or another, you don't put you don't commemorate them in the most solemn part of the Mass. But I believe in that article, and you can find it on traditionalmass.org. Okay. It's called A Grain of Incense, and I do explore that because that question has been asked. It's a good question.
I would add something to that too, and that is that if you're going by pure legality, then you must accept the new Mass, then you must accept Vatican II, you must accept everything that has come down from modernist Rome, because none of that is condemned by any entity. You see, you would say, well, if we're just going to accept what is legal, well, then you become a modernist to blow up your balloons. Because you're saying the traditionalist is saying Vatican II is wrong, the new Mass is wrong, it's a sin, it's heresy. Why then does he not apply that to the promulgator of these things? Why do we wait for a legal declaration when we have not waited for a legal declaration in making a decision not to go to the new Mass and in rejecting a general council of the Catholic Church by all intents and purposes? So it doesn't make any sense to hold out for that. I always use the example, if the person next door to you were a child molester and a known child molester and child murderer, would you say, well, he hasn't been condemned by a court of law, so therefore I'll send my children over to play? Of course not. You would never do that. The condemnation in law comes after the verification of the fact, and usually lags behind the verification of the fact. And it is only possible for someone to be condemned in court because people have already verified the fact in their mind. They're already thinking it and acting upon it.
Well, then this will never be, in a sense, it will never be resolved, because you have modernist cardinals electing a quote-unquote future pontiff, or in Francis, and you have modernists condoning the modernist pope. This will just be one happy cycle until when?
Until God inspires one of these people to repudiate Vatican II, or in some way in which, somehow or other, in which Vatican II is repudiated. It's the only way out of this problem.
Yeah, and we don't know the future. We don't. One thing I would like to like to mention. Thank you for your question, and thank you for the citation, by the way, to the Times. That yes, indeed, it is correct that I have New York Times article, and it says, with simple actions and address, the new Pope shifts the tone at the Vatican. And then we find all the way down, for an audience that he will hold with the cardinals on Friday, the Pope instructed them to wear plain black cassocks and not red with white lace surplices. So apparently he's going to fool around with that too. But
does that have something to do with Lent, though? I mean, because I don't know what the Novus Ordo does with the Lenten. I mean, is that the penitential robes that?
No, I think they just have one outfit.
Oh, okay.
They even under the old rules, they allowed you, some wiggle room as far as having a penitential pontifical outfit. But no, it'd be interesting to hear the reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got to be something that's tied up with the this hamming around about humility.
Now, how many of them own black cassocks?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Unless he's saying wear your habitum pianum or something,
Maybe he means that. Yeah. So, and it is the New York Times.
We've gotten some feedback from a couple of our listeners that perhaps we've been joking too much and we've been inviting some jokey callers. So, what do you think, Your Excellency? Are we taking Francis too lightly?
No, I don't think so. I think that it is humorous to a certain extent, balloons, and I mean, he has made himself absurd. Ecumenism is absurd. And also, you have to look at the light side of some of these things because it is so serious. If you think about it too much, you might go crazy.
It's incongruous.
Yes.
And that's where, that's where humor comes in sometimes. Yeah. But it does have obviously it's the underlying issues are all serious issues.
Yes.
But even in a place for even in standard religious argumentation and discourse, there is a place for humor. You even found it in the man in the gospel the other day who was born blind. And the Pharisees were, pressing him about, this is so bad that this man cured you by mixing mud and spittle on the Sabbath, and who is he? And finally, he got tired of it, and he said, "What? Do you want to go and become a disciple of his?"
Yes.
And sometimes something like that is is an effective answer. So.
Yeah. I don't think he deserves to be taken seriously. He would only deserve to be taken seriously if he professes the Catholic faith.
I think your points are well taken. I think for those listeners who haven't listened to our show before, Father Cekada and Bishop Sanborn are not only intelligent, but they do enjoy laughter, as any good Catholic does. And so while I don't think that our levity has been the contributor of the trolling calls, I think that this is a very popular topic, and we're getting a lot of listeners tonight. And we have had on previous shows, we have non-Catholic listeners and some Novus Ordo listeners, and we're going to get some interference sometimes. For those of you who are just joining us, you're listening to Restoration Radio. Our show today is on the new claimant to the Vatican II papacy, Francis. Habemus Papam is the title of our show. And I'm joined by His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn, who is rector of the seminary, Most Holy Trinity Seminary in Brooksville, Florida, and Father Anthony Cekada, who works up at St. Gertrude, the Great Catholic Church in Ohio, where it's a little colder than it was here earlier for you today in Florida. Right, Father?
Just a bit.
Well, I want to. We do have some more calls on NQ, but I want to make sure that we get to some of the other things that we've sort of taken a break. There was an art exhibit while Jorge Bergoglio was a cardinal, and it was a pretty shocking art exhibit. Your Excellency, I think you came across this bit of news, did you not?
Yes, I forget the name of the artist, but it was absolutely horrid, the things that this showing Our Lady with cockroaches and showing crucifixes coming out of a toaster and things that were just incredibly sacrilegious. And the reaction of Mr. B, as I call him, was one of we shouldn't be too quick to condemn this, and we should be patient with it, and it was something that cried to heaven for vengeance, and his reaction to it was very, very mild, which I think is very revealing,
Some things you have to express real anger at.
Yes.
And that certainly was something, at least certainly what I've read of it, that would have called for real anger and denunciation and call of the Catholics to outrage. But he wasn't going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, along that same line of a mild response to a shocking art exhibit, and Novus Ordo Watch let us know it's Leon Ferrari, who was the name of that quote-unquote artist. Part of that meekness also is part of the culture of apology of JP2, and under Bergoglio, the Argentinian bishops issued a collective apology in October 2012 for the church's quote-unquote failures to protect its flock during the military junta regime, during which time Bergoglio was head of the Jesuits in Argentina. What do we, Your Excellency, Father, how do we look at these apologies? Apologies for the Inquisition, apologies for discovering America. How should Catholics look at those sorts of actions?
Oh, just part of the general dismantling of Catholicism. It's a sort of a nice way, you might say, of repudiating the Church's very character and essence, because those things that they're apologizing for are part of the Church's essence and flow directly from it. They want to repudiate the pre-Vatican II religion, so they apologize. How could we have done such a thing? Something in our youth that, our crazy youth that we did. They see the pre-Vatican II Church as sort of like the Old Testament, and that the Church went through this tremendous change, or of course it did. At least the modernists imposed it upon Catholic institutions. And so they somehow have to deal with this 2,000 years of contradiction of what they're doing, and so that's one of the ways in which they do it.
Yes, and the continual contradiction and downgrading of things. We talked about Francis's program, it seems, of downgrading the papacy. And I just noticed on Rorate Caeli that the instruction has been sent out. The Apostolic Nuncio in Argentina said that sent out an instruction to people there saying that the Holy Father has asked me to transmit to all bishops, priests, religious men and women, and to all the people of God, that's the Novus Ordo term, his cherished recognition for the prayers and expressions of warmth, affection, and charity that he has received. At the same time, he would wish that instead of going to Rome for the beginning of his pontificate, you may keep the spiritual closeness that is so much appreciated by accompanying it with some gesture of charity toward the neediest. In other words, this I see as another type of downgrading. Normally, if the Catholic Church has a pope, that's something that people want to celebrate. But no, this guy, the humility ham, is telling them that, well, no, you can't do that, that you have to give your money away to someone else. And it's this sort of grandstanding, and at the same time running down the importance of the papal office.
Yes. Yes, like this morning, the going to the hotel and paying his bill and getting his baggage. A truly humble man would have had followed the normal customs of an elected pope, and would have done nothing to disturb what was common for popes to do, and what was due to their dignity. But that was a media stunt, and of course the media picked up on it. And so he's wearing his humility like an armband. Look at me, I'm so humble, which of course is a contradiction. But he could have easily said to some Monsignor, "Go pay the bill and get my bags," which would have been the proper thing to do. But
one of the things that one of the fundamentals you're taught of the spiritual life and in the religious life, which he would have known as a Jesuit, is that your true humility consists in following the program, doing what's expected of you, doing what you're told, and not standing out.
Yes,
and that's part of the essence of it. And this grandstanding is exactly the opposite of it. It's media stunts. The idea that we were joking earlier about the retirees bus, but this morning. Or after the election, he tells the cardinals he's going to ride the bus with them back after he's elected to the Casa San Marta. And the showiness of something like this, or telling the people that, well, I want you to bless me.
Yeah.
It's the wrong thing. There's something that is directly contrary to basic spiritual principles there. And unfortunately, people fall for it, as they're supposed to. One of the things that there's this French traditionalist priest who is not well known in America. When I was over in Switzerland in the Pius X Society, and his name was the Abbé Georges de Nantes, and he had a very good line about Paul VI, who used to occasionally pull stunts like this. He said that the problem with Paul VI is that he did not have the humility of his glory. In other words, he tried to show off how humble he was by putting aside the different symbols of the papal office when he should have been just humble enough to go along with it.
Yes, humility is self-forgetfulness. That's the definition of it. And you try to blend in as much as you can.
Yes.
All right. Well, we will. We've got a few more minutes left, and we're going to go back to the calls for our last caller, and then we'll take a question from Twitter, and then I think we'll have to let our clergy get a good night's sleep. They've certainly had a long work day. John from New York, I think you have a question on an older article of Father Cekada's regarding, is it episcopal consecration?
Yes, thank you. Father Cekada, you mentioned earlier this evening that you consider Francis's orders doubtful. But going back to your article, you seem pretty certain then that the new consecration rite was invalid, and I'm a bit confused now.
It's at least doubtful. When you talk about the new rite for priestly ordination, in the Latin there's one word missing. So one can make an argument possibly that it's doubtful. But when it comes to the new rite of episcopal consecration, no, it is invalid. There's no question about it, because if I said something else, I probably misspoke, and it should be clear from the article, because what was done was a substantial change of the meaning of the form. For consecration, or one of the elements is missing. So I would say that it's definitely invalid.
All right, thank you, Father. Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you. And we've got a question from Twitter, and it's referring to, Your Excellency, Father, did you have a chance to look at the text of the Urbi et Orbi blessing given to all people of goodwill?
No, we missed that one. At least I did.
Well, we've got the text of it here, so I'll read it. And now I would like to give the blessing, but first I ask a favor of you. Before the bishop, again, there's the reference, before the bishop blesses his people, I ask you to pray to the Lord that he will bless me, the prayer of the people asking the blessing for their bishop. Let us make in silence this prayer, your prayer over me. Now I will give the blessing to you and to the whole world, to all men and women of goodwill. Do you have any reflections on that, Your Excellency or Father?
Well, you have the Bishop of Rome business, and your bishop. This is language that has never been seen before. So we have that diminution of the papacy in that. Also, it's another display of a false humility. It's more of the same, and really that's all it is.
For those of you who are just joining us, we're at the tail end of our show. This is Restoration Radio. Our show tonight is Habemus Papam, a take on Francis, the first, the claimant to the latest claimant to the post-Vatican II line of claimants to the Novus Ordo papacy. Our guests have been His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn and Father Anthony Cekada. We're getting close to the end of our show, Your Excellency and Father. Any final thoughts on what this election means and what opportunities can be brought forward for traditional Catholics, Novus Ordo Catholics, non-Catholics, observers of the Catholic Church?
Boy, talk about an open-ended question. Well, it's an opportunity. His what you see with him, with Francis, is you see what you could call heteropraxis. In other words, his lack of orthodoxy is primarily manifested in his actions, and what he, in other words, he shows that he adheres very much to the principles of Vatican II, and he puts them into practice, and has consistently done that across the board. And I think that being able to see that as clearly as he seems in his actions to communicate that to everyone is an important stepping stone to get people to realize really the problems ultimately of Vatican II. He sort of concretizes the problems of Vatican II with the actions that we've discussed here, with regard to ecumenism, religious liberty, the understanding of the papacy, the sacred liturgy, and so on. His actions sum up the problems, and I think that it's good that something like that should be made clear.
Yes, with Ratzinger, and Ratzinger was a radical leftist from the point of view of theology, but in order to point that out, we had to delve into his very obscure books and recite all of these long quotes to people to show just where he was and is theologically, because his praxis, that is, the practical order, was one of a Novus Ordo conservative who was interested in the traditional Mass, and as I said before, wore a lot of the accoutrements of tradition. So even though he was a very, very strong leftist radical in theology, it was very hard to point that out to people because most people can't understand what he says, and you need an awful lot of theological background to understand it. And secondly, are not interested in hearing all of that stuff. But a single balloon says so much to any average Catholic that has any sense of the sacred and any love of the sacred liturgy. Just one balloon will do it. Or one ecumenical act, kneeling down in front of Protestants. That says so much that is much more indicative of what's going on. That's a big change. Then that's something to quote unquote look forward to, in the sense that that's you're going to see, in my opinion, a lot of shocking things out of this man.
I guess stay tuned is the watchword there.
Yes, I mean we're only 48 hours or not even just less than a few days into this, and look what's happening already.
For those of you who didn't know, our show tonight has been sponsored by Novus Ordo Watch. And if you don't know about the website, it's been a great place to get information before the conclave, after the conclave, and pretty much for everything. Since 2002, Novus Ordo Watch has been exposing the Vatican II Church and its false popes by comparing and contrasting the new religion with the true religion, the modernist Novus Ordo teachings with the teachings of the Catholic Church. Go to novusordowatch.org. That's novusordowatch.org to see why the new pope is not a true pope and how the modernist Vatican II sect differs from the Catholic Church. That's novusordowatch.org. The show is also underwritten by True Restoration. You can find our work at truerestorationmedia.com, and you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/True Restoration Media. You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/True Restoration, and on YouTube, where you can see videos of Father Cekada, and soon, hopefully upcoming, some videos of His Excellency Bishop Sanborn. And that's at youtube.com/True Restoration. As I said, our guests tonight, who've very generously given of a lot of their time, and we thank them for that. Bishop Donald Sanborn is Rector of Most Holy Trinity Seminary in Brooksville, Florida. And if you'd like to thank His Excellency for his time, make sure that you send a note down to him. He's at 1000 Spring Lake Highway. That's 1000 Spring Lake Highway, and that's in Brooksville, Florida. And you can send him anything you'd like. The zip code is 34602. If you don't have the funds to send him a contribution, at least send him a note thanking him for his time. Father Cekada, you can find at his new website, sggresources.org, where you'll find all sorts of interesting apostolates that St. Gertrude is involved in, including Father's book, Work of Human Hands. If you'd like to write to Father, you can do so at 4900 Rialto Road, Rialto Road, Westchester, Ohio, 45069. Please make sure you thank our clergy. We have the very great benefit, and I never take it for granted, and I hope none of our listeners do either, that we have access to truly Catholic clergy to give truly Catholic commentary on non-Catholics. And please help support our apostolate, again, with your prayers, with your letters of support, and if possible, your financial donations. Your Excellency, Father, thanks so much for your time. I know I've asked a lot of you today, and again, as I said, I don't take it for granted, so thanks for sharing your wisdom and your insight.
Thank you, Stephen.
This program was brought to you free of charge by the sponsorship of Novus Ordo Watch. See for yourself that the Church of the Second Vatican Council is not in fact the Catholic Church of the ages. Go to novusordowatch.org.